They do make mistakes, and this is why you want somebody on your team watching out for your interests. When you're doing anything that doesn't fit into the conveyor belt, the
Right.
standard
Especially
residential
like-
purchase, yeah.
Will your title policy go to the beginning of time, even though the special warranty deed only goes to maybe 2 weeks ago?
A title policy, there may be, I can't say I've ever looked at a
You know,
title
I don't
policy
know
after
that
foreclosure.
he's asking, does it go back to the sovereign if all their
If there's a
insurance is on-
foreclosure or something?
No, if it's a special warranty deed.
Well,
You
right.
know, I think you've got to talk, I don't know the answer to that, Don.
I mean,
I would have to talk to
here's-
the title
I
policy. You
consider
certainly
myself
want
an
full
expert,
coverage to
and
the
I
sovereign.
didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to it.
I know, the answer, I can tell you this, if it's just a special warranty deed in the chain of title, yes, that doesn't affect the title policy, the title insurance,
Which would go back to.
which would go back to the sovereign. Now, if there's what I was talking about is if there's a foreclosure
Yeah.
in the chain of title, I haven't spent enough time looking at title policies on REO properties to
If
see
there's a tax
if,
foreclosure, you can't get the darn things for a couple of years.
Yeah.
well, yeah,
Probably
you've got, there's
4
a
years.
redemption right, and, depending on what kind of foreclosure
Well,
it was.
even if you get a sign off from the person who has those rights,
Right,
I don't think you can still get it.
no.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's,
because there's another period, 2-year period that they can come back, and it's not a redemption period to try to set it aside. That's why they won't do it.
It's like a,
What is the total time on that?
Well, I've had one title company tell me they wouldn't do anything for 4 years, but I remember
just go to a different.
Quincy, what's his name, the Quest guy, he had a title company one time, and he would do it after 2. And it's not 2 years after the foreclosure date, it's 2 years after they record the deed. And they may not record the deed for a month or 30, 60 days, depending on how busy.
I've seen at least 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, so. You wanna talk about your foreclosure situation a little bit, before we get too far down the road?
It's a very convoluted deal. I was just trying to make a little diagram here. When well.
You wanna draw a picture up here for us, so everybody can understand?
Okay,
And we'll let-
Why don't you do that? We'll do show and tell
are
tonight.
we on video right now, Michael?
Is it okay?
Yeah.
The names will be changed to protect the.
Yeah.
the guilty.
Well, no, we did our disclaimers at the beginning of this, but if somebody's watching the video, they should know that this is just general education about law and tax and asset protection. It's not legal advice, or tax advice intended for anybody's particular situation. And if you have a specific question for your particular property or investment, you need to talk to a professional and, with all your documents in hand and talk to that professional confidentially, so that the professional can ask you all the right questions, to give you the best advice that's tailored to your situation. That's not what we're doing here tonight. There, so now we got that on the video while
Got it on
Don was
video.
doing this. See how efficient I was using that time?
Well, he's right now, have a question.
Sure.
Do you, I don't have this class covered, but I was wondering about how do you create like LLC or draw?
Repeat the question.
Okay, how to create an LLC or a trust? There are easy and wrong ways to do it, and then there are harder right ways to do it. The easy wrong way to do it is to simply fill out the form at the Texas Secretary of State website and fax it in the Texas Secretary of State, and 48 hours later you get a certificate showing that you've created an LLC. All right, that only works for LLCs, it doesn't apply to trusts. Okay, trusts are a different animal. But the problem though is that gives you your LLC legal status, but it doesn't say anything about the rights and duties of the owners of the LLC. that requires a company agreement. And you have to have a company agreement, or your LLC doesn't really help as between you and your co-investors, your business partners. Now, if it's just you, and there aren't any business partners or co-investors, then I have to seriously question why you would want an LLC. Because it doesn't provide very much protection, and there are administrative burdens and costs to forming an LLC when it won't provide very much protection for you operating on your own.
Because people suggest that if you had, when you have many tenants, you have the risk for them to sue you for anything. If you,
Right.
I mean, if you don't have an LLC that protect you.
Right, and this is one of those things that everybody knows, but everybody doesn't know it quite correctly. All right? The truth of the matter is that an LLC protects you from liability for contract breaches. Except that, and so it can protect you individually from breach of landlord's duties under the lease. Okay, when you have a lease, it's going to show that there are a few duties the landlord has. Most of the duties in the lease belong to the tenant.
Right.
There are a few duties the landlord has. If the landlord breaches those duties, and the landlord is the LLC, not you individually, then the LLC is liable to the tenant for breach of those duties under the lease, not you. But let's play that out a little further, okay? So your LLC is liable, but it's the LLC that owns the property, that owns the asset. So what exactly are you protecting? Well, what you're protecting is your personal assets, your other properties that you own through other LLCs. All right, if you've got all of your assets in a single LLC, you're wasting your time and money with the LLC. The point is to have assets that aren't in the LLC that are being protected. But if somebody is suing you, though, because they got hurt by a dangerous condition on your property, because you failed to provide adequate security in a known high crime area, because you didn't have a lock on the gate around the pool, and some kid fell in and drowned. You good? Okay. Then that's called tort liability. That's not contract liability. And you individually, as the agent for your company, if you're the one responsible for managing that property, you are the one responsible for maintaining it. You were the one responsible for making sure that it was safe, that there was a lock on the gate around the pool. Then you're individually liable whether the property is owned by an LLC or not. If you're the one making representations to the tenant about the lease and what the property is going to be like and how great it's going to be to live there, and then the tenant decides later they got cheated by your representations, you're individually liable. You're individually going to be sued. And that LLC, the fact that the property is owned by an LLC, and it doesn't stop that. It doesn't protect you from that. So, and even on the big ticket items, so the property is owned by an LLC, so that means you got the loan in the name of the LLC, right? Well, of course, out here in the real world, most lenders lending to an LLC with no track record, they're going to require your personal guarantee. So you're still personally liable on that note under the guarantee, even though the property is owned by an LLC. So you have to, what you need to do, people come to me all the time and say, I want to get started in real estate investing, I want to form an LLC. And I have to have a little talk with them about, well, let's talk about whether you really benefit from an LLC, what that actually gets you, because a lot of times I talk people out of forming LLCs.
because.
If it's just gonna, all right, I mean, and ultimately, it's always your decision. Again, it's a question of your personal risk tolerance, but you've gotta look at just whether how much it helps you, and versus the cost of doing it. I've talked to people here with very, very elaborate setups to protect themselves from liability, and they spend a good amount of time managing this setup because it's so elaborate, so intricate. And that's time they're not spending finding the next deal. That's time they're not spending enjoying the money they've made through their investments. And if that's how you want to spend your time, I'm not going to tell you that's wrong.
Took me out
I'm
of
just going to tell you that's not how I would spend my time.
Yeah, it took me out of it.
I wish you were here before I got my LLC.
Okay, Don,
Yeah.
you got your diagrams
I
finished?
think so.
Don,
This
Don,
is-
hold on. Before we go to Don's example, Mike, can you give your opinion on what David was talking about as far as need for an LLC to finish that subject?
I think, I'm probably not as against him as he is. The biggest problem with forming an LLC, especially if you're not setting it up correctly from the start, is you don't operate it correctly. You don't get a bank account. You use it like your own personal bank account, even though you got the credit card you use, you also buy your lunch and you buy your groceries. You take money out to go to the ball game. And so you start intertwining your life with that LLC and you don't respect it as a separate entity. And if something happens, then somebody's gonna sue both the LLC and you, and you're gonna have a hard time defending against it. I think they're good to shield liability. You know, how you get it set up and how you operate it's gonna depend on what kind of exposure you may have on a personal liability. Anytime you defraud somebody, they're gonna sue you individually. If you've been grossly negligent, you know, you're gonna be sued. But it does provide a level of insulation to assets. And there are some real tax advantages to use them, which Michael Plax could talk about, to help you save on income, on possible employer taxes, employee taxes, depending on how you set it up.
Well, and let me be clear, I'm not against LLCs. I'm saying when you're a one-person show, when you're doing everything for yourself, just getting started, you get very little protection from an LLC. But if you're in a partnership, particularly if it's someone besides your spouse, if you've got employees, if you've got a management company that you're contracting with and relying on, anytime you could be potentially liable for someone else's conduct, that's when an LLC really helps. That's where that shield against liability really comes in. No, that employee wasn't working for me, that employee was working for my LLC. That's not my business partner, that's just another manager in the LLC. And the LLC then is liable, but I'm not personally liable. That's, to me, no, LLCs are great tools, and I do form a lot of them, but there's a certain tendency to just start off and form an LLC before you really even need one. And Michael's correct too, you've got to actually operate it properly. Forming it doesn't do you any good if you don't actually treat it like a separate company and you don't use it properly.
And that's the biggest issue I always see is
Isn't that used where you have 10 people who go in on a market and buy it? Then that works for,
yeah, you want some sort of business entity that's not a partnership or a joint venture.
And a lot of times, traditionally, what it used to be, you'd have a limited partnership in a situation like that, when you've got that many. You see 2 or 3, 4 co-owners, an LLC is kind of your default. But for larger groups of investors, in real estate, you're more often gonna see limited partnerships, I think even these days. But ultimately, I defer to tax advisors on choice of entity, what kind of entity you want.
And what kind of income it's gonna generate, and what's the best advantages you can get on tax wise?
Before I formed mine, I went to talk to my CPA, and then I talked to my attorney, and they gave me the same thing what I should do. And, today, I talked to my CPA again, let them know that I got my LLC, and, you know, I still need to get with the IRS and, you know, register through there. And, I talked to the bank today to get a loan, and I could get a loan, but I couldn't, you know, like you said, because it's not established, so I'd have to get a loan in my name, but I couldn't put the property under my LLC with this bank anymore. Is there other banks where you can guarantee the loan and put the LLC under, I mean, the property under your LLC?
Most banks that I'm familiar with will let you put title in the LLC as long as they've got your personal guarantee. And it may just be a matter of asking your banker the right questions.
Yeah.
What if I gave you a personal guarantee? Could we then do
Right.
this in the name of the LLC? Because if you do that, then maybe eventually you can get to the point where you can take the personal guarantee off of the note.
And this was one of the larger banks, and what she explained was, you know, that they used to be able to with this bank, but they said that they, you know, if I try a local bank, or, you know, a smaller home, that, you know, it's more likely to do it.
I think that's probably good advice.
Right, you know, sounds like that bank's made a business decision, they're not gonna do it that way anymore, and so you just need to move on and find somebody else.
There are lenders out there who will do it, to answer your question.
A lot of them are looking for 2 years affiliation with the bank and 2 years of history with your LLC. If it's just wet ink, they're not gonna do it.
All right.
Okay,
Okay, I'll